nice to see you again. I mean, see you. Um,
Virtually.
yes, I know you have a new puppy. So, will he be making any appearances?
Oh, she's been sequestered outside of my room. Our prep call, she played a very active presence and was biting at everything within reach. So,
I can relate to Marcy though. My three kids have a snow day today, so I hope they haven't burned down part of my house while I'm in my office. So,
oh man, yeah, we're all dealing with a lot of distractions. It's like the theme of today.
yeah.
Aside from the pre-ascribed theme, which I'm still very excited to talk about, although I could talk about my puppy for weeks, as my team knows. Um, but I think let's get started maybe with a little bit of an example to kick things off. I know during our prep session, we talked a little bit about your work previously at Sprint, and that there was a closed loop study done then. Maybe to start off a little bit of details on that case study, I would love to hear a bit more about how the partnership for the closed loop study came about internally, and what were the goals.
Yeah, I suppose I didn't even really fully introduce myself. So I actually that's okay. I lead media, integrated media partnerships and social marketing at Northwestern Mutual. To Ethan's point, that I actually prior to Northwestern Mutual, I actually had my own consulting business, but part of that was working as an embedded employee at companies. So I actually ran media at Sprint for 2 years. Also ran media and global social for Motorola Mobility. And before that, I worked at Kraft, a full-time employee at Kraft and Mondelez, running digital globally for them. So I've just joined Northwestern Mutual 5 months ago now. Um, and yes, to your point, we talked about a case study that we ran at Sprint. That was a cross screen or closed loop study. As at Sprint, as a challenger brand, we were always looking for innovative opportunities to test and make our media work smarter for us. So in partnership with our agency, Horizon Media, who happens to be my current agency as well, we embarked on a test with data plus math on this closed loop attribution study. I honestly think we were one of the first partners to work on something of this scale. And the goals were really measuring the incremental foot traffic to our stores and incremental site traffic to our site, driven by exposure to both linear TV and digital. I think like I mentioned, as a challenger brand, it was super important for us. We were always the biggest hand raisers. You got something new, you got some, we always wanted to test things and kind of be ahead of the curve just to get smarter. And that's kind of how the study came about and how we started the project.
Yeah, I think to give folks context as well, I coming from the data plus math side was familiar as well with the study, and tertiarily involved, but excited to hear more about it and kind of have my memory refreshed a bit. I would love to hear maybe any other details or background on the study, things that you kind of learned.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. It was a long study.
Mm.
You need patience to conduct these types of attribution studies and these closed loop studies. You're not going to see results in with a month's worth of data. Or I know that some companies, you have senior management who are asking for optimizations daily, and that just doesn't work. You have to be realistic about it. So we met on a regular basis and did constantly optimize, but it was it was not a quick fix. It was something you wanted to look at over time, because you run obviously different weights of media during different parts of the year. You wanted to look at consistency. Were there any trends you saw, in GRP levels or in numbers of impressions you were running? So it was, I think that was the biggest learning experience. Like you can't, and having to talk senior leadership down from wanting to optimize on a minute by minute basis.
Yeah, I think I feel that pain acutely. I think, we have a best practice at LiveRamp and Data Plus Math for the measurement work we do. You can start seeing statistically significant data at 2, 3 months, maybe even less. But like really, really, like given all of the sort of factors at play, and the way in which this data comes together, like you really need to be waiting 6 months or so at least for for actioning. Is that kind of in line with the cadence you see from your measurement solutions?
Yeah, I think this was easily a 7 to 9 month
Mm.
undertaking by the time we got to like finished results. We did make some changes in, over the time of the study, but it was probably a 7 to 9 month project. I mean, is that I think you said like 6 months is what you typically would see.
Yeah, 6 months is, I think, the norm to really start like digging in and starting to take insights and apply them in a really kind of pointed and targeted fashion. Like I think with all of the clients we've worked with on measurement, it's felt very similar to the pressures like you described at Sprint, where you've got somebody who just floated a big check or a big budget item for a huge study, and 2 weeks in, they're like, all right, are we changing our plan now? Are we optimizing? What are we getting? And it's understanding that there are pieces and things you can start to learn and apply early, but at the end of the day, your media, you're not optimizing most media on a day-to-day or even a week-to-week basis. So it's important to understand the broader trend of, you put a plan in flight, you need to understand the pieces that are hitting at different times and create a more holistic learning and approach based on a longer period of time.
Yeah.
That's sort of the best practice, I think.
I think too, we were kind of learning with data plus math as we went along too,
Mhm.
having to deal with the walled gardens of Google and Facebook, where a large part of our spend was, and working with data plus math to bring those data points in as well. The linear TV side and even the online video was not as that was pretty easy to bring in, but it was pulling in those other things where they're traditionally walled gardens and sorting out how to get that incorporated into the study. So
Yeah,
it was kind of I think it was learning from both sides.
yeah, certainly. I think we're, from the speaking as the measurer, like you're always looking for whatever little cracks in the wall you can see to peek and pull whatever information and insights. On that kind of note, though, like what sort of insights and results did you see, maybe holistic or high level?
Well, obviously, I can't share the exact exact results, but I will tell you we did see incremental store visits that were aligned directionally with media weight. Also saw some interesting store traffic increases based on day of week. When we ran things, that was a slightly different from when we would have originally, like, typically had thought that store traffic would have increased. So that was super interesting, I think, in figuring out where our weighting made more sense, what days of the week, how many GRPs.
Yeah. No, I think I've always found it kind of interesting. The day of week insight is somewhat always counterintuitive in that, you think about driving folks to a store, they're already more predisposed to go on a weekend. Maybe the media you're serving on a weekend, it's not doing as much to get people who wouldn't have gone otherwise. Whereas that midweek visit, anyways, a tidbit there. I think in general too, like some of the other learnings are in line with a lot of the measurement studies we're running now, right? And generally follows, I think, the basic logic of, the more you spend on a given platform or a given time, like generally the more down funnel conversion activity you'll see that can be attributed back to that specific element. I think one thing we've really coached, the brands we work with, is to really start figuring out things like, optimal frequencies, right? Like, sure, if you keep spending, you're going to keep seeing an effect. I can keep putting more and more ads in a given performing network or platform. But like, how do you like figure out at what point that rate of return really starts to level off, right? How can you identify places where you're still gaining efficiency and where you maybe have already hit saturation, and learning how to balance those two things and really, get to the best possible impact.
I think that was the interesting part of working on this, was that the data we garnered from the study help inform things like frequency. And that's why where
Mhm.
the optimization comes into play during the 7 to 9 months is figuring out what is that optimal frequency. When do you hit that rate of diminishing returns? I mentioned before, we also got the, GRP weighting from it, day parts,
Mhm.
even down to the specific programming and the sports we bought in, because you would see traffic increase depending on what day parts you were in or what sports you were buying in. And then mirroring that with who we had identified as our target audience when we did the buys too. I think it was, it was pretty eye opening when you start looking at all of those things together.
Yeah, the amount of data you can pull in, you start getting a whole bunch of stuff you haven't seen before. And I think it's really great to see such a like a buy-in to leverage those results to really inform and change your media optimizations and planning. Like I think we'll talk a little bit later, like about how your experience has played with measurement and how that's applied to specific media partners. But I'm also really curious because I think we see a bunch of different things at Data Plus Math and LiveRamp around internal buy-in and internal kind of stakeholders. Like how did you get buy-in across the org, across media buyers, planners, executives, your agency, like really to ensure that the measurement results were going to be carried into action?
Yeah, I think this was, this was something where there was support from all levels on this particular study from the CMO on. Um, I think when you mentioned the agency, actually the agency came to us with the opportunity, right? So that was an easy, I mean, it was a lot of work for them to do too, right? Think of all the data they had to ingest and figuring out, help us within our own organization where to get the data. Um, but so that was an easy thing because the agency came to us with the opportunity. So I have to applaud them for that. And then we sold it, all the way up and down the line internally, because who doesn't want solid attribution study, right? Who doesn't want to know if their media is working for them to drive sales or foot traffic, which you would hope then equates to sales. So it was I think you have to have support through the entire organization. The CMO, if he's bought in or if they're bought in, they can help with the leads of the data organization, the insights organization, because you need participation from all of those players, right? It's not just a media thing. It's cross matrixed participation. And so you need some senior leadership to help sell it in.
Yeah, no, I total agreement again. Like I feel like we've done a lot of these measurement studies as LiveRamp and Data Plus Math, and I think we've done some where the buy-in is really only coming from one side of the house. Like it feels like in some cases maybe it's just analytics driving measurement forward, right? There's some really intellectually curious and stimulated people there who want to dig into results. They want to theorize about causes and how to make the greatest impact. But when it comes time to action, right, they'll be taking it to the folks on the media side or potentially even the media agency who maybe haven't been involved, haven't bought in initially, and there's questions about validity, or there's hesitation about, well, I don't really understand how we can trust that this will take action. This is not the way media is bought. It's probably older thinking to some extent. We see that less now. But I think at the other side of the coin, we see instances where maybe the agency or really just the media or the marketing team alone is trying to bring measurement to the table without buy-in from analytics. We often find that those teams that have brought it forward are often just spending a ton of time just defending the budget and the decisions, whether it be for the analytics or for the potential changes. Really, the best results are exactly what you talked about, right? Making sure that it's been sold in across the org, everybody coming together and saying, we know we need to measure what our media is doing, and we know that we need to take results and make tangible changes based on those results. And what's more, like continue to do that. It's not just you measure once, you set it, you forget it, you leave it alone. It's rinsing and repeating and creating like a good virtuous cycle, across agency and brand and media and analytics, where I think we see folks really getting great results.
Yeah. And I think, don't get me wrong, it wasn't like smooth sailing the whole time. We had a lot of healthy debate internally because, at Sprint too, you're working with someone who runs acquisition marketing, working with someone who runs base marketing, working with the data team, you're working with the insights team, the analytics team, so there was a lot of healthy debate every time we presented any sort of results, because it wasn't like we waited 7 months and then presented results. It was like, as we were going along, here were the things we were finding. This is where we needed to iterate and change things. There was a lot of healthy debate internally. So you have to, you had to gain alignment as you went along the process, and ask for everyone's help as we were iterating and optimizing too. So it wasn't like, oh, hey, the CMO's aligned and it's all good. It was, yeah, it was a process. But I think that made for a better study for us too.
Yeah, I think healthy debate and like everyone bringing their A game, I think is a really like good thing to have. Like it's, you mentioned one other interesting thing too, which brought something to mind, right? You have different folks who have their marketing have like different goals. Right? You might have a brand marketing and an acquisition marketing person like coming together, and you're telling the brand marketing people, "Ooh, your media is not doing a great job at driving store traffic." Well, maybe my media's job is not necessarily to drive store
Right.
traffic.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, you do have to think about that because I mean, like think about it. The acquisition team is literally does that they're to drive acquisitions. The
Hmm.
base team, their or brand, whatever you want to call them, is literally to keep customers we already have. So it's, but you need input from both of them because you're going to use data from both teams. Like, do you want to build lookalikes based on our base customers, right? To drive acquisition. So you do need, you can't tell them the media is not working, their media is not working to drive acquisition because that is not what it's intended to do. But what we do need from them is data so we can build lookalikes, people who are loyal to us and have already switched to our service, so there's still has to be a lot of cooperation
Yeah,
through
I
the
love
whole
it. The
process.
data begets more data. It's my favorite.
Yes. Yeah.
um, I'm curious, maybe switching gears a little bit now from Sprint to like your current work at Northwestern Mutual. Like, how has this sort of been applied or impacted your work there?
Yeah, so I think I mentioned I've only been here about 5 months. And as we look to evolve our media strategy, linear TV is still a very important part of our strategy. Not to say we haven't evolved to some, to streaming and to some of the other OTT platforms, but employing a closed loop or cross screen study can help us be smarter overall about about moving our business forward, and that's key, right? I don't no, I think we talked about this when we had our prep call. Northwestern Mutual is a 163-year-old company. And people probably have heard of it, but the marketing department as it exists today is truly only about 4 years old. They really changed and their view of marketing from being in complete service to the financial advisors and doing stuff that would appease them to driving brand marketing and awareness for the company. So as we're looking at how to best drive awareness, these kinds of studies will be key to us, and flexibility, even in what we run. So like, is linear TV the best way for us to drive our brand awareness? Is our digital working hard for us? If TV is working, how do we run it? Do we keep running? And we've had very large scale sports sponsorships in the past with things like the Rose Bowl, which we've exited. This was our last year, was our last year in it. But like, how do we run it? What networks do we run on? Are there different sports that make sense? So combining that with digital is important because, as we know, for our brand, search and social are very effective for us and very efficient for driving leads to our financial advisors. So what's the effect search and social has when combined with TV on driving leads? Are we hitting people across those channels? How is that affecting total frequency? I think, what I did, that study we did at Sprint will be very applicable once we employ something like that at Northwestern Mutual.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think I've certainly noticed, and I think it's great to hear that it's a kind of ethos you've instilled at Northwestern, that more and more brands are thinking about like total frequency. It's not just seeing reach as a siloed platform specific measurement or metric. It's really like, across channels, right? You're still hitting somebody there. They're going to see it somewhere. For the user, it might not matter as much. Like, how long has this been your norm? Like, have you had to make changes to this as reality?
I mean, since I've come in, we've made a lot of changes in just the way we plan the media. I think in the last year with the current environment, there have been a lot of quick pivots in general. Not just at Northwestern Mutual, but I mean everywhere. But we've had to pivot a lot. Media NCAA is canceled, so it's, or March Madness is canceled, so we have to figure out what we're pivoting to. So I think, it has affected us a bit. I think as we look I just had a discussion earlier today with our agent with Horizon about like, how do we look at measurement moving forward? How are we going to be looking at it now that we're moving into uh, more environments in the media landscape? Like, what does this look like? Do we employ some sort of cross-screen closed loop study like we had in the past? So, I mean, this is a conversation we literally have on a daily basis.
That makes someone in the closed loop cross screen measurement field very excited. Because I know like as few as feels like 18 or 24 months ago, like we would work with brands or agencies where it felt like there really wasn't a cross screen ethos. Like you'd have TV sitting separate from OTT, sitting separate from online video, from programmatic display, and everything was being planned and measured generally separately. But and I heard one of the other speakers actually talk about this, like at the end of the last session, like from a consumer standpoint, like I am sitting at home on my couch, I'm on my Roku smart TV, I'm watching Bravo on Sling, and during one ad break, I can see like ads purchased 3 or even 4 different ways and by 4 different teams. But to me, like it's the same experience happening right now on my TV. Not to mention that maybe I've got my phone open, I'm watching an ad on TV I see something that really interests me. The other night it was a dog walking service. I'm opening up my phone, I'm searching for it, I'm clicking through a search URL, I get on the site, and then the next day when I'm in front of my laptop and the dog's chewing at my feet while I'm on a call preparing for a session, and I'm frantically now going back, hitting the display ad that's been following me everywhere to go book a dog walking service, like all of these things have interacted, and the combination, the sequence, and the measurement across all those things to the actual conversion event are really important for brands to understand and really nail. And I think when those media and buying and analytics groups are sitting together, or at least aligned on like measurement and the need for cross-screen measurement, everything goes further.
I'm laughing because I think about, especially in the last year where everyone's now at home, right? I sit in my office every day and I have my phone usually tilted next to me streaming some news thing or whatever. Meanwhile, I'm on a Zoom or searching for something, or I mean, so it is. And I honestly at Northwestern Mutual, we're sort of, I mentioned this, but in sort of transformation mode with media, right? So they've been doing the same thing for a long time. We've been doing the same thing for a long time. And like I mentioned, we're focused on these huge sponsorships in the past, but now we're able to start thinking about that. Like, how are people adapting to being at home? And, you're on a Zoom and you're searching for a dog walker, or I'm streaming the news off Twitter next to me while searching for something else or getting served an ad on Facebook, or in my Gmail. So that is all something I think everyone as marketers needs to think about. I do think that total frequency is going to play a role in how we look at media moving forward. And our media is already, it's planned holistically. So it should be something we don't plan inside. It's not like we plan OLV here and we plan linear TV here and then we plan Facebook over here. It's all planned together. And I think that's part of why my role, I actually oversee social. So not just the paid social, but anything we do in the social space, influencers, everything, because it directly it interacts with the media all the time. So
yeah, and it all exists on the same platform in some respects. Correct. for the consumer.
Yeah.
Maybe switching gears a little bit from like talking about media buyers, maybe switching a little bit to partners, right? And then the folks you're actually managing in that respect. Like how are media partners reacting and adapting or working with you on closed loop measurement?
Yeah, I feel like, some broadcast partners are slightly more flexible and have been ahead of the game. Some have been kind of late to the game as far as cross-screen flexibility or cross-screen or closed loop measurement. Many have their own solutions in place within their platforms. I think, like I look at NBC and they've done for years, have done a great job. And now with their one platform offering, I mean, you see they're really trying to, and a lot of the partnerships, I think yesterday was just announced that they signed a stronger, bigger partnership with Twitter. I mean, they've really done a good job. And they have an amazing in-house measurement team that we've worked with, like I worked with at Sprint in the past on doing, but it was within their platform. I've always struggled with the fact that like these media companies build solutions for their inside their company, but then it doesn't translate to what you're doing on another network, which is why we did the data plus math study, right? But I have to say, like, they have done a good job of creating this sort of one platform solution, that at least within their environment, you can measure, there's flexibility across the platform, even with some of their outside partnerships like a Twitter or a Snap.
Yeah, no, I think speaking personally, I've certainly seen like a heightened willingness and eagerness and investment, even to your point, in like broadcast partners, like coming to the table to get creative with measurement and flexibility within their total platform. There are always some slower movers or few spare holdouts, but I think we've seen so many media partners like eagerly work with brands to like take results from closed loop measurement, or to your point, bringing up their own internal measurement tools to really impact media mix, and at the end of the day to try and benefit the end result of media. I mean, is that kind of in line, I'd say, continuing on that thread with how you're approaching partnerships with media partners, cross-screen consumption coming into the mix, given the changing effects of those sprawling platforms like NBC's?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like fragmentation and this sort of changing consumption habits they're going to continue, right? And we need to be smarter about it, right? As new generations come into the media world. I was just talking to somebody. I also teach a class at Loyola University on media planning, and every semester I ask at the beginning of the semester how they were exposed to brands that they like, and not one person has said linear television. It's all through social. It's through TikTok, Snap, whatever. So it's interesting. So I think that's going to continue, right? So we do seek partners that have a lot to offer across their own properties, right? So they have video, they have digital, they have social. I mentioned the NBC thing, but we partner a lot with Disney. So it's not just what we can do on ESPN or ABC, but what we can do across ESPN, Hulu, if they have programming on Good Morning America. We know that our audience is interacting with their properties throughout the consumer journey. So it's about advertising the right message in the right environment at the right time. And how can we be flexible across their, if it's an ABC or an NBC, how are we flexible? In places where we can create custom content. So we've done work with NBC. We've done brand partnerships with like the Courageous Content Studios with Warner. I can't get off of Turner.
Old habits, style.
Old habits, right? We see an opportunity there to leverage multiple assets. So you're creating content, but it's run on their digital platforms. We can then run it on our digital platforms. They might even put it on linear TV. It's as we shift more into that space, where we're just allowed more targeting, we have the content and then we can target it appropriately. So I hope that answered your question. Like, how do we?
Yeah. No,
I think we just look for partners that can offer us more across. And I'm not looking for just one channel. It's omni-channel, right?
Yeah. No, and I think that's like what's been so, for me, fascinating to watch is like these media partners have built up, massive cross-channel and cross-screen property sets. Like, we talked about our own media consumption habits, like watching all these things at once. Like, it's really great to see partners collaborating with brands like to make the most of that. I think it's, there's sometimes I almost forget I could be watching, 3 Warner Media or 4, ABC Disney things at the same time. And, I don't necessarily always click in immediately that, yes, I am seeing the exact same, potential ad salesperson hitting me in all these categories, but it's really great and fascinating to see that they're.
Well, and I think, we look at it as a partnership and collaboration versus one-sided. Like, I don't wait for them to come to me and say like, oh, we have this, this, and this. It's like, hey, we're looking at doing this. What do you have to offer us that we can do across your platform? Which is why, like, when I mentioned the NBC thing, right? It's like they've done that smart relationships, and even like I've worked with CBS and Snapchat in the past, right? So it's like they're all like developing partnerships with outside companies that I think can just help advertisers as they look to reach different consumers, or even the same consumer. They're trying to reach you, Ethan, and while you're on a Zoom and you're looking for a dog walker, and so.
Yeah, no, they're doing a good job. I've got a few questions from folks, and actually, the one that feeds directly into this, like, what do you consider success? Like when it comes to these sort of media partnerships?
Um, I think, basically what I just was talking about is this true collaboration and finding something that really works for us as a company where we're both working towards the same goal. So knowing that our brand is looking to generate leads, and in doing that, we want to tell our client stories with our financial advisors. I'll give an example. We just did a integration on Good Morning America with ABC. And we went to them and said, you know what, our biggest time of year is New Year's. People are trying to get not only their physical fitness, but their fiscal fitness in order, right?
Mhm.
And how can we do it? We want to portray one of our financial advisors, and giving tips on how to in this economy and environment, how to stay ahead of the game. And that worked really well for us, and it played out across Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, as well as the linear TV. So it was more of a partnership. I think we're looking, that to me is success. Is how does a partnership come together, and how do you do it across screens?
Yeah, how does measurement fit in there? Talking from the as the measurement person, I'm always curious to plug that piece.
Yeah, I mean, so I mean, for us, success is obviously looking at the leads. Did it drive? Did we see increased volume in leads? I think as we go back and look at awareness numbers, did that help with our awareness? I think it was a very successful program for us looking back.
That's great. Yeah. Yeah, it's always interesting to see. I think as we've started to try to pull in threads of measurement from some of these deeper media integrations. It's fascinating to watch these things interplay and really kind of combine and make an impact. Like you'll have your activation event, and you have all of these kind of sponsorships or kind of actual ad buys tied to it. And really, it's interesting to see how like the rising tide of those things together really does, at least from a measurement perspective, what we've seen, like lift all ships. The spots around there and the spots on that network tend to continue to improve.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too. So like as you look at some of the partners we work with, especially nowadays, like I look at Warner, right? So AT&T and Xandr are part of their fold. And the sheer amounts of data that they have at their fingertips, I mean, can only help an advertiser as they're looking at measurement, or more precisely target um, their consumers. So it's a matter of like, what data can you give to them, and to really identify your target, and then working with them to partner to come up with amazing content.
Yeah, and talk about just a wealth of data there from all the different platforms they touch.
Yeah.
Um, another question, and this one kind of rooted like very much in the theme of today's session. How does fluidity and the ability to deliver impressions across screen impact your upfront deals, or maybe your deals in general?
I mean, it obviously, with the right partners, Fluidity creates a huge opportunity to extend reach. I mentioned the NBC One the one, not that this is an ad for NBC, but I feel like they've done a great job with their one platform product, right? It is a huge factor in upfront conversations in terms of understanding each media group's linear capacity versus their digital and OTT capacity. Um, the conversation has kind of shifted recently to networks looking to limit linear spend and push volume towards digital, based on where growing supply exists. I think that's true and I mentioned it with my Loyola students, right? So I remember, I don't know where I was in a presentation where they were talking about how a show was not successful on linear TV, but when it was put on Netflix or on another platform, it like it took off, because it was probably geared towards a younger audience who wasn't seeing it on linear television. So I think, more networks are pushing for that in the delivery of impressions. And I think as advertisers, we need to ensure we're not sacrificing effectiveness, and we're getting that flexibility. So it does play a big role in upfront discussions, and how can we reallocate if we see the environment shifting.
Yeah, and it's so clear as well, I think, to see like network partners focus really, really heavily on ensuring the ability to provide fluidity, right? From platform acquisition, everything from from Tubi through to Pluto, through to all these like other kind of streaming pieces getting added to somebody's tool chest. And not just, and that on top of folks continuing just to stream more things alinearly.
I think, I've seen more deals come through or proposals come through in the last, 6 to 9 months that really have sort of that match spend component to them, where it's okay. Here's the linear, but then we have this much in digital, and it's if you need to move back and forth, you can. I've seen us move liability from linear to digital and OTT in the last 6 months. So I think it does really play a big role in any discussion we're having with partners these days.
Yeah, it's one of the big things we're always looking at in a measurement perspective now is where are you getting incremental reach on your nonlinear platforms, right? If you're going and running on across NBC platforms, are you getting different folks, incremental folks on your NBCU linear portions and your NBCU nonlinear? It's interesting to see as you almost see it in the numbers as the consuming habits start to shift. You're seeing more and more incremental reach driven by some of these nonlinear places.
But then we go back to our optimal frequency discussion too, because are they the same people? Are you driving up frequency or are you extending reach? So, I mean, those are all things that need to be considered as you're buying in those one platforms too.
Yeah. I know we don't really have too much time left. I've heard, Adam before me kind of end with a kind of parting. If you could wave a magic wand, what you'd like to see. I know it's not a lot of time to answer it. I'm happy to share my tidbit if you need a little more time to think about it. But
well, I mean, yeah, sure, share yours. I have some thoughts.
Yeah, I think my magic wand as a measurement person, as a data person, is more data. I would love more windows into the walled gardens. I think it's going to be a pretty big wand for that, but I will keep wishing on that star until I get that access to data.
I'm going to join you on that star.
Okay.
Actually, when Marcy answered it before, I was like, I know this is coming to me when we get to the end of mine. I actually wrote down data and being like having more control over our first party data and being smarter about how we use it. So I'm sure I've said this 3 times now. We're a very old company, right? 163 years old. So think about it. Our clients are clients for life usually, right? We do their financial plans, they own life insurance with us. A lot of our records are started as paper records. So it's now getting that data and how do we harness it? So that for me would be the magic wand. Like, how do I harness that data that we have to build lookalike audiences? Who's become a client and why and when and what are they like? So.
Yeah, that's great. Maybe I'll talk to my LiveRamp pals about, paper file data ingestion. I'm sure we'll get there someday. Yeah.
I love it. Beth, your brief at Northwestern, it sounds really fascinating. It's almost like you mentioned it's a 160-year-old plus brand and the marketing department's only about 4 years old. So it's really like you have an opportunity to kind of restart that brand marketing in some ways. That's an unusual opportunity in this day and age.
We kind of call ourselves a startup, even though we're not. But I mean, and I shouldn't say there was a marketing department before. It just wasn't in service of building a consumer brand. So, we do consider ourselves almost a startup within the company because it's an amazing opportunity to kind of restart, reset, and rebuild the marketing function.
It's fascinating. One thing you mentioned that I loved is that media buyers have had to pivot a lot in the last year. I think we all need to go to Loyola and sign up for your course on media buying. I know I want to. Ethan, one other question came in before I let you go, which is someone was asking about measurement studies and are they always on or are they campaign based? You'd mentioned Data Plus Math a lot. Could you touch on that just real quickly?
Yeah, I mean, I'll answer from my perspective. I think there's a combination. Something like the Data Plus Math study we did was almost an always on study. Like it takes, like I mentioned, it was a 7 to 9 month undertaking, but you don't just stop after that. You're just constantly iterating it. But then there are campaign, but like at Northwestern Mutual, Sprint, we had media always on. We were always running linear television. At Northwestern Mutual, we run TV, or video in like 3 specific pods of the year. We have always on digital, but so in that case, you are measuring some things that are campaign specific, but then you would have that sort of kind of overarching, closed loop attribution study running all year.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, Ethan, if you have another.
I think you said it perfectly. Always on, and just because to your point, there's different fighting strategies, and the market and the factors into which you're running your media are always changing, right? What might happen in your Q4 media won't necessarily hold up in your Q1 media, and so continually having that iterative process of measuring, optimizing, and measuring it again is the best success. So typically always on for data plus math.
Perfect. Well, thank you both so much. Really appreciate it. So thank you so much, Beth. It was great insights to hear. So for folks who've joined us today, we have just one session left.